Hello? Hello? Yeah, okay. Right. Yeah, all right. Right. Well, good morning to everyone. Αξιότιμη κυρία Υπουργέ, κύριε
Honorable Minister, Secretary General, President of ECA.
Conference on the protection of unaccompanied minors through the National Child Protection Line 1107. We're taking this opportunity to thank you all for your participation. Announcing the start of the conference, with great pleasure and honor, I invite the President of the National Center for Social Solidarity and National Coordinator of the European Child Guarantee, Dr. Artemis Anagnostou-Dedouli, to address the audience. Ms. President, would you please come to the podium?
Καλημέρα σε όλους σας. Ευχαριστώ πολύ το...
Thank you very much, Constantine, for your excellent English. On behalf of the board of ECA, I want to welcome you to today's meeting and thank you for being with us. ECA and his mission, its work, are known to everyone more or less. However, there are three pillars to the mission of ECA: care and housing of abused women in Athens and Thessaloniki, and for the homeless in Athens. It also deals with emergency entries, protection of women victims of trafficking and victims of home family violence. It also, one other mission of ECA is the protection of vulnerable children, and it is responsible for the fostering, parenting, adoption, and of children that have been subjected to abuse. I left for the end the very cause of today's meeting, that is our national telephone lines, line 197 for adults, and the national child protection line 1107, operating 24/7, free of charge, providing counseling and psychological social support to minors that need help and adults as well. The inflows of refugees in Greece made it necessary for the services of social care and psychosocial needs and to be adapted indeed to the needs of the minors, unaccompanied minors, and the most vulnerable ones. Of course, one might wonder, why is ECA taking on this work when this duty belongs to the ambit of the Ministry of Migration? Historically, ECA from 2011 was already involved in the social care of vulnerable refugees via the service of management of requests for housing of the asylum seekers and unaccompanied minors. In 2018, kept exclusively the competence of managing requests for housing well-being of unaccompanied minors and guardianship of minors. However, there was another provision later on in 2020, and by means of which these competences were transferred to the Ministry of Migration. ECA received, took on the materialization, the implementation of the overall project, especially the 1107 emergency line, hotline. There was personnel that spoke Arabic, Urdu and Farsi, and thanks to this we achieved our goals, and it would be, Minister, a very good thing for everybody, for the children, for minors, for adults, for this program to be enlarged together under your auspices and with your cooperation. In concluding, and before I call to the podium our Minister, I would like to thank her personally, as well as Mr. Moskov, Secretary General, as well as the staff of the ministers of the ministry, with whom we really worked perfectly well together. And a memorandum of understanding has been signed between us and the General Secretariat of the Ministry. I would like to thank our ministers, Mrs. Zaharaki, for her support, and the previous former minister, currently Minister of Employment, Mrs. Mikhailidou, who entrusted ECA with the implementation of such a novel service. And I should not omit to thank Mrs. Stefu and Mr. Piros for their cooperation in the field of all this project. I would like to also thank the executives of ECA, Mrs. Wunari in particular, the Ministry, the Service for the Management of European Projects in the Ministry of Citizen Protection, and the guidance and support for the guidance and support of every step our services take. And I would like to thank the financial space of Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein, especially Norway, for the scientific support and financial support, and for the confidence, for the trust they expressed for ECA. Mrs. Minister, you have the floor.
And now, the Honorable Minister for Migration and Asylum, Madam Vultepsi, will address the meeting. Good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. Madam President, Artemis, dear Artemis, dear guests, participants, chairman of this meeting. Indeed, there has been a very important cooperation partnership with ECA, especially in the period of the pandemic, where we needed many more infrastructures for women who were threatened in their house, because, as you know, the most dangerous place for a woman is her house. So we had to function very fast and jointly, many people together, to be able to have the results, the actual results that we had at the end, because the number of reports has gone up, and especially after the latest events, the number of incidents, the reports of incidents are higher. Of course, we always had such horrible incidents, but our goal is to have women report the incidents. And also our struggle is to make sure that the children in danger can get in touch with some organization, some hotline. to be able to give an alarm. So my presence here today aims to stress the importance of our cooperation, as you said before, Madam President, in such a sensitive and important sector, that is the protection of the most vulnerable of the vulnerable persons, that is children and especially unaccompanied minors. As you know, in May 2023, an MOU was signed, which was mentioned by the President, between the then Special Secretariat for the Protection of Unaccompanied Minors and the National Center for Social Solidarity. The goal was precisely to enhance this hotline, child protection hotline, that was financed through the European Economic Area. According to Article 39, but you said everything, Artemis. I didn't have to write all this speech yesterday. So according to Article 39 of the Law 4960 of the year 2022, the goal is to immediately find places for emergency accommodation of unaccompanied minors, and this is the responsibility of the General Secretariat for Vulnerable Citizens and Institutional Protection. And after the elections of 2023, the Special Secretariat for the Protection of Unaccompanied Minors came under this General Secretariat, and now Mr. Moscow is the Secretary General. So based on this legal framework, when an unaccompanied minor is identified who is homeless or lives in precarious conditions, the national mechanism for emergency response is informed. EMEA is the Greek abbreviation, so that the child is immediately transferred to an emergency accommodation structure. EMEA was founded in April 2021, and it has contributed a lot for the early identification and safe accommodation of around 5,000 unaccompanied minors so far. And I think this is a great success for the Greek state and its institutions. I would like to point out also two big successes of the mechanism. EMEA was presented as a good practice in the Global Forum for Refugees in December 2023 in Geneva. And the same period, it was awarded, this mechanism was awarded with the second prize of the European Network for Crime Prevention that took place in Valencia. And this is very interesting for sociologists. We should say that what we are trying to do and what we saw in other countries as an exacerbation of the phenomenon is to avoid the child delinquency, which is very widely spread, and it's quite alarming because it concerns all children, regardless of the ethnic origin. And in some cases, we see, in Sweden, for example, that they have to use the army in the streets in order to combat such problems, because organized crime and radicalization as well, which is another issue in our times because of the tragic events. Don't forget that now there are 3 wars in progress in our region. So because of these 2 criminal networks, which is organized crime and radicalization, we could have very bad developments in terms of minors, especially unprotected, unaccompanied minors who could be involved in organized crime, because those gangs are searching for such young people to weaponize them and use them for crime. For example, transferring drugs, compulsive labor, trafficking. So what we do with ECHA jointly is to remove weapons from the organized crime and offer those children to the society, ensuring social cohesion. So actually, we are the partners of the Hellenic Police, my dear friend, representing the Hellenic Police. Because this is a way to remove a volume. We are trying to remove a volume. We know that that the police is very busy, so we are trying to remove workload from the police and the rest of the state. That's why it is so important to continue working together and continue being friends. I wish you the best and every success to this workshop. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Now, an address from the Secretary General for Vulnerable Citizens and Institutional Protection, Mr. Moskov.
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Καλημέρα σε όλους. Αρχηγού παρόντος.
Thank you very much. Since the leaders are here, the minister, the president, I don't need to repeat, just a personal mention. First of all, a big thank you to the staff of ECHA, EA Grants, MEA, and all our partners being here. You will hear two presentations from our secretariat, but a special personal reference, because ECHA is my second home, Madam President, because when I started 25 years ago, trying to serve political and legal commitments of our country in the foreign minister, where I used to serve, through actions that had to do with the protection of vulnerable citizens, especially human trafficking. But even before that, since early 2000, I worked together with ECHA staff, and we were trying to find the novel actions and interventions together. And the common thread was always what we call a public-private partnership. So we were trying to utilize this triptych, which is also the success of our secretariat. That is public, the state, civil society, and international organizations. So these three poles of action and intervention, if they work together, we will be a success, because it's extremely difficult to jump in proactively and try to give tough solutions that have to do with the root causes of the problems. It's very difficult to work for integration, because it's not just protection and the prevention of delinquency. The point is that you have to be persuasive and beneficial for those children, giving them prospects for the future and hope for the future. This means, of course, education, training, Greek language learning, integration in the labor market. And the minister works on this. She's committed on this, and they are working on such problems. So we are very optimistic in such a tough field where there is crime, delinquency, and many other problems. But if we join our forces, and this is the message, of course, as I said, with ECHA, as the National Coordinator for Human Trafficking, we worked closely together. We set up the national mechanism for the saving of the victims. And now with the national hotline, we are working together, because as the minister said, it is not just a rescue hotline for children, homeless children, and those living in precarious conditions. It's the first care of our state against people who are in tough conditions and precarious conditions and are in danger. So if we want to serve social cohesion, which is the ministry under which ECHA comes, we have to give some prospect. And this is where our initiative is starting, because when you save, when you rescue somebody, as we do through EMEA, then this person can truly hope for a better future. So we are very happy, and we do want to continue this cooperation. I wanted to continue working with them up and trying to look for financial instruments to fund our activities, and also with the civil society and the whole state. We have to stay together, have our forces joined, because we don't have the luxury of having fragmented and piecemeal solutions. Because sometimes there is suspicion in our roles. So we live in times where we need cohesion and we have to join our forces. Otherwise, we cannot have the desirable outcome. Thank you.
Ευχαριστούμε, κύριε Γενική.
Thank you, Secretary General. And now we are going to hear Mr. Kresias, who is a police director for the management of civil and development projects. Minister, Secretary General of Vulnerable Citizens and Civil Protection, Honorable President of ECA, distinguished speakers and guests from Greece and abroad. Thank you very much for the invitation to address this day's conference organized today by ECA with the aim of raising awareness among the participants in matters of protection of unaccompanied minors and defense of these minors' human rights. Of course, this is a problem that has been aggravated over the last few years in an environment, in an always changed environment, due to the inflows, migration inflows. Respect to human rights and human dignity is the most important value and human right. When we try to protect all those people thanks to the help of interpreters and the national line of Child Protection 1107 of ECA. Therefore, this special group of unaccompanied minors could use this line and also the national system of social solidarity. Presenting the more general environment, I could use also the economic, the financial mechanism, the funding mechanism of the European Economic Area, that and also the Kingdom of Norway, the Republic of Iceland and the Principate of Liechtenstein, that for 2014 to 2021 provided credits of 116.7 million euros. The great migration flows made it necessary for money for funds to be liberated, and the funding mechanism selected to offer this financial enhancement. 33 million euros were decided to be given to Greece in the fields of asylum and migration, and out of these 33 million, 16.5 million euro were were allotted to the support of national policies and that related to asylum and migration through the program GR. For this program, it was determined that the service of management of European and development projects of the Ministry for the Protection of the Citizen would be the one responsible. And ECA was given a key role as an interlocutor for the Kingdom of Norway, that is one of the partners in the donor countries. And thanks to the funds provided and the work given, we can see that the obstacles have been done away with thanks to the interpreters' services provided. We would like to thank warmly the board as well as the executives of ECA for the development of good relations.
Εντάξει. Ευχαριστούμε τον κύριο Κρεζία.
Thank you, Mr. Kresias, for this address. Now, we shall need a 5-minute break in order to do some settings here. Thank you.
Στη συνέχεια θα προχωρήσουμε στην πρώτη θεματική ενότητα.
Now the first session is starting. The topic is the development contribution of the European Economic Area in the protection of unaccompanied minors in Greece. The moderator is Mr. George Handlanos, a sociologist, member of the board of ECA, and the former general director of ECA. Mr. Handlanos, you have the floor.
Καλημέρα. Εντάξει, ωραία.
Good morning. Thank you for coming on behalf of ECA. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Well, if I were asked 10 or 15 years ago, I'm talking now as a sociologist, if they asked me about my predictions for the following next years, I would not be able to predict the refugee crisis. And I would not have been able to predict COVID, of course, the pandemic, neither its effects nor the three wars mentioned by Madame Vultepsi, the minister. It's unprecedented in our neighborhood, in our region, to have three ongoing wars. And whenever there is a crisis, there is a necessity for cooperation, interstate cooperation, but also cooperation among services, among agencies or ministries in a country. So in the context of today's meeting, let me wear my eyeglasses.
Το ΕΚΑ ανέλαβε.
So ECA has been assigned with this act of the European Economic Area for the reinforcement of the agencies to be able to better respond to such crises. So in this context, in this first session, we will have the following speakers. Madam Ioanna Dzika, who is the head of the special service for the financial instrument, the financing mechanism of the European Economic Area and the national contact point. Mrs. Dzika, you have the floor. Good morning. Thank you very much. I warmly thank the National Center for Social Solidarity for their invitation today, and I thank the President, but also I thank you for the general cooperation because the professionalism and commitment of all of you has helped to implement this project. Dear participants, it's a great pleasure being here with you today to discuss the programs and the targets, the goals of the European Economic Area for the period 2014-2020. EEA represents the contribution of Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway, aiming to reduce the economic and social inequalities and strengthen the bilateral relations with 15 European countries, including Greece. Greece and the donor countries share the same values and ideals because all four show a very big interest in the challenges of our times and the difficulties faced by the mankind. The need for sustainable use of our natural resources, the need for peace, stability, and security. All countries share the vision of working together for a green, competitive, and inclusive Europe, as it is shown in the EEA grants message. In particular, for the period 2014-2021, which shall be closed in the following days, EEA grants have distributed in total 2.8 billion euro, and 116 million of this has been allocated to our country. Critical sectors were chosen for the program interventions that reflect both the interests of the donor countries as well as the interests of Greece. They cover a huge range of sectors, including sustainable development, education, social integration, social inclusion, and innovation. Each program has specific targets that are driven by the need for sustainable development and social prosperity. The Special Service for Planning, Coordination and Monitoring of the implementation of the EEA financing mechanisms is the national contact point and has the overall responsibility for the implementation of the MOUs in the country, as well as for the implementation, the fulfillment of these targets. During the program period 2014-2020, its scope was the management of 5 operational programs: social inclusion and empowerment of Romas, water management, renewable energy sources and energy efficiency, sound governance, institutions and transparency, and the program under which we are here today, asylum and migration. So reinforcement of the national asylum and migration systems, as well as, and also the national contact point also handles the bilateral relations fund. The first program for the integration, inclusion and empowerment of Romas to respond to the needs and challenges of the Roma population in Greece, the daily presence of a task force in 4 pilot areas with a high Roma concentration ensures the effective implementation of the national strategy for their inclusion, because it takes part, it is involved in supporting local authorities and mobilizing Roma population in all policies that have to do with their social integration, that is housing, education, employment, health, empowerment, and so on. Then the program for water management. This responds to the need of improving the environmental condition of the water ecosystems, supporting the rational use of water, especially in vulnerable areas and islands. Fresh water for vulnerable areas and islands, technologies for water leaks in water grids have already been installed with visible benefits. And there are also research studies that provide data and solutions to improve the situation of water systems or to improve the water management. Awareness-raising campaigns take place in remote islands and schools, stressing the problems, water problems, and the importance of improving the condition of the water bodies. This program is implemented without any delays or difficulties, with a very particular impact in geographical areas with major water management problems. Then we have the program for renewable energy sources and energy efficiency. The goal there is to promote renewable energy sources and energy efficiency, and it contributes in the implementation of a balanced growth framework with high added value and prospects for the local economy, while it makes residents familiar with sustainable practices that improve their quality of life. The energy crisis that we experience, especially after the war in Ukraine and the Middle East, makes the necessity of this program even stronger, because it helps to moderate the effects of this crisis and also to make the transition to greener energy sources. This was the reason why the program was amended with additional funding. Then we have the program for sound governance, institutions and transparency, which contributes to integrity, transparency, accountability and effectiveness of public administration. Through the suggested actions, it has improved the immediate prompt access of citizens to public administration, technological modernization of public administration, and cutting bureaucracy. Then the program for asylum and migration aims to ensure the good functioning of the national asylum and migration systems, and it also helps asylum seekers to enjoy their basic rights. The target group is focusing on third country nationals who arrive in Greece, and the emphasis is placed on unaccompanied minors and vulnerable groups. The program contributes also in enhancing the bilateral relations among national institutions that play key roles in the field of asylum and migration and the partners of donor countries. So there are many actions and several results during this journey, which is about to finish. at the end of the month. And through the EAA programs, major progress has been made in several sectors. Infrastructure projects have been implemented, innovation and entrepreneurship have been promoted, living conditions of citizens have been improved, and new training and education capacities have grown. The only source of funding, which is completed 12 months later, is the Bilateral Relations Fund, which is a flexible source of financing that supports initiatives aiming at strengthening the relations among the donor countries and Greece. This way, the strategic partnership is enhanced, as well as networking and exchange of knowledge. The initiatives can be implemented either in the context of programs agreed in the MOU and managed by the Greek authorities, or through initiatives taken outside the framework of the programs. And it is the National Contact Point which is in charge of such initiatives. The National Contact Point also handles initiatives that have to do with the programs that sign contracts directly with FMC or FMO, and is in charge of implementation, control and monitoring of the Bilateral Relations Fund. Last month, with the support of the donor countries, and given that the resources had already been exhausted for the current program period, we managed to boost the Bilateral Relations Fund with an additional €1 million that was channeled to an open bid. And you can find further information and the relevant documents in our website. However, we are faced with many more challenges, and it is necessary to make additional efforts. The program periods are an opportunity to enhance cooperation among countries and achieve our common goals for a fair, sustainable, and human development. Therefore, we have to continue working with commitment and determination to implement the EAA programs and to achieve our goals, because it is only through partnership and ongoing commitment that we can create a better future for all of us. 2024 is a landmark for the National Contact Point. The eligibility period for the programs is ending, and the procedures are starting for the completion of the projects, which is a very challenging and time-consuming endeavor that will reveal the real fruit of all this effort made since 2017 by all partners in unprecedented and tough conditions given the COVID-19 pandemic. In parallel, at the end of last year, we made an agreement on the level of negotiations between the European Commission and the EAA countries concerning the financial mechanism for the period 2021-2028. So this means that all sides, all parties will now edit the agreed documents according to their procedures. And once the agreement is adopted by all member states, negotiations will start with each one of the 14 states that benefit from the financial mechanism in order to shape the financial framework of the new program period and decide the new programs. Therefore, we are in a demanding, a challenging year, but also as a year of celebration, because 2024 is the anniversary year. It's 30 years since the EAA financial mechanism in our country, which needs to be celebrated. And we want all of you to be our partners. Thank you.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ, κυρία Τζίκα.
Thank you, Mrs. Zika. A national contact point is absolutely vital. Without your contribution, this program would not make headway. Let us go on with the second speaker, namely Mr. Christos Litsas, police officer in the Ministry of Citizen Protection. And he is going to talk to us about the development, capacities development for the national asylum systems and migration for 24-21. Thank you very much, President, dear panelists. I want to talk to you about the implementation of projects managed by our service. My name is Christos Litsas and I head the Department of Reports, Verifications, Certifications in the European Asylum and Migration Fund in IDEAP. I hope that now you can hear me better. At the outset, I would like to present to you the projects under the general title Development of Capacities for the Management of National Asylum and Migration Systems. It is the GRG program. In collaboration with the GD Migration of Norway and the Ministry of Migration and Asylum, we are developing this program to the end of improving national asylum and migration systems. This program includes 8 predetermined acts and a small grant scheme that have already been agreed upon and are underway. And I would like to focus on the core actions of this program. The first one is focuses on the enhancement of appeals authority with an overall budget of 908,000 euros. The second program focuses on the enhancement of the asylum service in order to better function and allow better access of vulnerable groups to asylum procedures. Budget 3,219,864,000 euros. The third project concerns the enhancement and development of national capacity for strategic planning in the areas of asylum and migration, 459 for 460,000 euros. The other work, the other project I wanted to focus on is the improvement of capacities of ECA in managing unaccompanied minors. Through the national line 1107, and of course we want to help them solve their problems, preferably in their mother tongue. This may contribute to for the betterment of the management of their needs, and the overall budget of this act is around 745,000 euros. There are other 4 important projects that are implemented in the framework of the program of the funding mechanism of the EA and together with IDEAP. And I would like to point out the importance of the initiatives taken towards the direction of enhancing asylum and migration systems. First project is expertise provision for fundamental rights to agencies, bodies that are active in the fields of asylum and migration. The budget is 188,000 euros, aiming at raising awareness and providing special knowledge and counseling to bodies involved in managing asylum seekers and migrants. This project is going to contribute to the development of best practices in respect of the fundamental rights of vulnerable groups. Second, it is the implementation of the work, improvement of the capability of the Greek police to detect, recognize and manage unaccompanied minors and vulnerable groups. 1 million euros in the budget of this. Third is the project for the enhancement of conditions during the first reception and services provided to subjects coming from third countries. This is for the improvement of the quality of services provided to these groups, and its budget amounts to 4,200,000 euros, 4,200,000 euros. Finally, for the project improvement of the capability of the General Secretariat for vulnerable citizens and institutional protection. This has, as I said, a budget of 4,200,000. The program GRG is an integrated effort for the improvement of national asylum and migration systems in order to ensure protection and integration of people that need protection. In closing, I would like to thank the ECA for their professionalism and for the correct and good implementation of the management system, and for its monitoring, which is one of the most important tools for the better monitoring of the implementation of a project that sometimes we had to work on together with ECA, and Mrs. Wunari knows this very well. And we, of course, aimed at the maximum efficiency and effectiveness of this work, of this project, managed by my service in accordance with the regulations of the fund and in combination with the national and EU legislation. Thank you very much for your time. Well, we spoke about the police before. You are one of the links in this action, which, as we said, requires synergies between many different agencies and bodies on a national and European levels. Especially for the fundamental rights of children, we have to be particularly sensitive, and I know that this is what you particularly work on. And then we shall come to the very soul of this project, Mrs. Despina Wunari, a sociologist. We were colleagues. We started this action together, and this action is now reaching a point of completion, and it will be of particular interest to hear Mrs. Wunari.
Είμαστε μαζί με τον πρώην διευθυντή μου. Θυμάμαι τη στιγμή που μου ανέθεσε αυτό το
I remember when I was assigned this project, I said, why not? Because I didn't know. I started in 2018. I remember the mail exchanges with Mrs. Pitsikoudi. I will play a video for you to have just a friendly start of my presentation. And then the presentation will be more wooden project. In 2018, we started planning the Predetermined Act number 4 when ECA was in charge of the protection for unaccompanied minors. This task was entrusted to ECA actually in 2011 by a ministerial decision. So in 2011, ECA was entrusted with the handling of accommodation applications from asylum seekers, and it started as a small service. In 2018, this service specialized in unaccompanied minors by the article of the law that assigned this responsibility to ECA, and that was the precedent of the current mechanism. The only difference concerning the emergency response mechanism is that MEA is called by unaccompanied minors themselves, while the service for accommodation applications was handling requests mostly from the NGOs. But as for the rest, it was doing what MEA is doing now. So it would make sure to accommodate minors depending on vulnerability. It was doing registration and also escorting of unaccompanied minors. In 2018, when I was writing the annual report, I saw that 6,000 applications had been handled, for the accommodation of unaccompanied minors. That's a huge number. In this context, the director asked me to design an action plan, to elaborate an action plan that would concern first the evaluation of child protection structures, and then I think the deputy director, who is sitting back there, was also designing a small project on interpretation for the child line. Because I may be taking the credit, but there are other people who should also be praised. So, 2,300,000 euro was the budget for this action, and it had two programs. First, the elaboration of an evaluation system for the child protection structures for unaccompanied minors, and the second part was interpretation, or rather enhancing, reinforcing this child hotline to be able to handle such requests. And when the responsibility for unaccompanied minors protection was transferred from ECHA to the Asylum and Migration Ministry, this project, sub-project 1, was transferred, and number 2 with almost 2 million budget, and it was implemented successfully by the Asylum and Migration Ministry. So this is the act that was implemented by ECHA. There should be music too, but you cannot hear it. This is the scope and the mandate, the mission of ECHA. This is the mandate of the National Child Protection Hotline, 1107. That's a short description of the project. This is the staff that was recruited. And these are the objectives of the project. This is a picture from the ECHA services. I will add a few things. ECHA provides two sorts of services, as mentioned by the President before. First, the personal services via a network of structures, that is accommodation, houses, structures, social support centers, and also national support services. National coordination services are shown here. The European Child Guarantee, national registries for child protection, the national mechanism, EMA, for reports on identification of human trafficking victims, management, and also handling of the certification process. In 2011, ECHA was entrusted with the National Child Protection Hotline for the protection of minors, that 197, that had already come under the National Plan for Numbering. And in this context, the national hotline was established, 1107. The National Child Protection Hotline works 24/7 and provides to minors, but also parents and teachers and other professionals, information, counseling, reference, and it also handles reports on the abuse and neglect of children and forwards them to the prosecutor. In 2022, the call center of ECHA was upgraded with a new web application for better handling and recording of the phone calls. As I said before, the unaccompanied minors were the population of ECHA for many years before going under the Ministry for Asylum and Migration. This is about the accommodation facilities handling.
Η μεταφορά της αρμοδιότητας.
Transfer of competence of responsibility in 2020 by Article 4 of the Law 4686. And this is the work that we designed in 2018.
Το οποίο είχε εγκριθεί, θυμάμαι τότε.
Which had been approved back then in 2019. In January 2019, it had already been approved. It included 2 sub-projects. Recruitment of 10 evaluators, 3 administrative staff, and also scientists. And then it was transferred under the Ministry for Asylum and Migration. There used to be 7 projects, and that was the 8th project. Our predetermined act, well, there was some reflection back then in the ministry and also in the funding body, the Ministry for Labour, and also ECHA and the EAA, the sponsors, the funders. The concern was whether we would still participate in the EAA grant program, since that was not our responsibility anymore. But all 3 sides decided that we should continue being involved because of our expertise. And also the staff of the EAA have appreciated, as they said, and they said that it would be extremely useful also for the Ministry for Asylum and Migration to continue being in this field. That's how we continued the predetermined Act number 4 with additional budget. 13 staff and 6 interpreters were hired for the most common languages, and also 2 social workers, 2 psychologists, 1 sociologist who would be the coordinator of the programs, and also management administration staff, IT experts, and so on. When we designed this project in 2018, it was a high-risk project. ECHA was thinking about it. The competent services were asking me, are you sure, shall we hire Urdu interpreters? How are we going to find them? I remember Anita back then, who had said that the EAA staff had said, no worries, try to implement it. We do know that it's high risk, but just try to do it. And although it was a high risk project, we managed to hire all 13 people. And there, simplification done by ASEP was very helpful in terms of the documentation asked for interpreters. For language proficiency, they just asked for a solemn declaration by the interpreters themselves. I really hope that in the asylum process concerning the unaccompanied minors, I do hope that similar simplifications can take place. It was extremely important. We would never have been able to recruit interpreters if there was a strict documentation requirements. And we hired all those 13 people, and this is thanks to the administration division of ECHA, the HR department, that made an excellent report. We were asking for very high qualifications, but there was also options if we could not find qualified psychologists with experience and second and 2 foreign languages and so on. There were also other options.
Το οποίο είναι αυτό. Είναι ένα στιγμιότυπο από την εκπαίδευση.
This is a picture from the training of the newly hired staff. And this way, ECA, after recruiting staff, has adjusted its call center so that you could choose digitally the language through a pre-recorded message, and you will be able to hear this message.
Δεν έχω ήχο. Γιατί δεν έχω ήχο?
Unfortunately, there is no sound from the video.
Δεν. Τώρα όμως δεν έχω ήχο, σε αυτό είναι... Φαίνεται ότι η πρόβλεψη των στελεχών του Ευρωπαϊκού Οικονομικού...
The staff of the EAA made a proposal which was very relevant and useful. Yeah, I would like you to hear the message heard on the call center. It would be important for you to hear this pre-recorded message. That's why I want the sound. In May 2023, as the President said, and as Mrs. Vultepsi mentioned, an MOU was signed with the Ministry for Migration. I thank, as the President said, the supervising ministries, the leadership of the supervising ministries, because they have supported us in very tough times in the beginning, where we were not certain whether to continue with the project or not. And also at the end of the implementation, when the financing was transferred from the Ministry of Labour to the Ministry for Family, there was an uninterrupted flow of funding, and we thank EMEA for helping us with those tough times for 3 months until the financing returned, and it was restored on the 8th of April. We also help the staff of EAA and the Migration Division of Norway, especially Mr. Tavridis and Anita Hersen. We thank you very much for your support and for your encouragement and your trust in ECA concerning the implementation of both projects, the bigger one and the one that is about to be completed. And I would also like to thank ECA Services for their support in the implementation of the project. Unfortunately, there's an echo in the sound. The interpreters cannot work.
Ποτέ να ευχαριστώ την ιδέα. Πραγματικά ο τομέας των ασυνόδευτων ανηλίκων είναι ένας τομέας όπου το λιμενικό, η αστυνομία, οι κοινωνικοί επιστήμονες, το Υπουργείο Εξωτερικών και όλοι ενσκύπτουν και συνεργάζονται αρμονικότατα, πολύ αποτελεσματικά.
The sound has been restored. This is an exemplary sector for the partnership among all services to this end. Finally, I would also like to thank particularly Madam Despina Makri from IDEAP, because for 3 years she has been the rock that supported the implementation of the project and was encouraging in tough times, and also the IDEAP staff who had been standing by our side. Mr. Kalpaxidis has also been very helpful in submitting the proposal. Actually, we did it together. He was the second person after me, and we discussed everything together. Finally, I would like to thank the staff recruited, hired under this act, for their major support and all these efforts. Their efforts to adapt to such a difficult task. I would like to thank Madam Nika particularly, because she has been my right hand, and although she was newly hired, she could even substitute me. And now people prefer to work with her rather than me, because she's an expert on all these topics.
Στο πρόγραμμα
I hope, and in this program, we have a poem from a poet who talks about unaccompanied minors.
το σχέδιο μιας καρέκλας.
And also a design of a chair by an artist who was inspired from this poem. And this shows the place that we have to give to displaced populations, refugees, and unaccompanied minors, because we need to give them a place in our society. As the minister said before, it's not about a charity or discretion. We either do it and give them a specific place in a coherent society, or we will pay the price, either us or the next generation. And that price will be a society where social relations will be disrupted. That's all from me. Apologies for taking more of my allocated time. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Not very well. I think that with these three papers, we got an idea of the framework, the overall framework of this action, and we can now have a discussion for 5 or 10 minutes before going to the second panel. Do we have any reactions, any comments, questions? Our ministry was established only a few months ago, the Ministry of Family and Social Cohesion, and social cohesion is of the utmost importance, because if the welfare state and social protection aim at bracing, at actually really preparing the vulnerable groups and really make them safe. So I think that the title social cohesion is of relevance. We don't want to have societies of 2/3 or 3/4. We want a society of 3/3, but it is extremely difficult. Some years ago we were in the societies of 2/3. Now we are in the societies of 1/3. Therefore, actions need to be coordinated, and it is very, very necessary to have evaluation of the actions implemented. We keep talking about modernizing, to modernize the telephone center of the ECA, the infrastructure of which was very old. It actually required a lot of money, synergies, and of course the will and the decision to have something implemented. Thank you. Please introduce yourself. I know you, but not everybody does. Yes.
Καλημέρα σας, είμαι ο Στέργιος Σιούτης.
Στέργιος Σιούτης, from the Division of Policies for People with Handicap. Humanly speaking, I would like to ask two questions. I would like to know about unaccompanied minors, if there are children with handicaps given the areas and countries that they come from. And second question, we hear how many children get killed or become maimed. And do we have data about how many of these children can our country support, given that things are getting worse in the world? So what is the capacity of our country to host children with or without a handicap coming from other countries? Thank you very much. Any other question? If not, we can have the answers.
Χαίρετε και από μένα. Γιάννης Αβρανάς.
Yannis Savranas from the Ministry of Labour, coordinating service. Mr. Shootis, the rate of people with handicap was 4% at the time. In other words, there was no deviation from the rate of the general population. I would like to congratulate the people for their work. If my memory is correct, it's 5,000 cases, the minister mentioned it, which is very important if you come to think that we had so many cases in a very short period of implementation. So if my understanding again is correct, because there was a long preparation time, and therefore if we had such results, 5,000 people, then obviously there has been a good outcome, and it's an indication that the program should be extended. And a thought I would like to share with you is, despite the fact that this program seems to be in the right direction, as a state of protection, as a welfare state, it aims at catching the children that fall out of the safety net and integrate them in a framework of protection. However, this program is based on the assessment of a failure. A child should not go to seek protection on its own. The state ought to have included this child as unaccompanied minor to the right protection mechanism that would look after it until it became an adult. This phenomenon, however, is not only Greek, but we see it in many other countries as well. So thank you. I think that these basic provisions of a real welfare state addressed to such a vulnerable group of people, such as children, that are the most vulnerable of all, must reach a level of operation that will be much more state-of-the-art, and housing, protection, and so on must really be ensured for these children. Thank you very much. Any other comments, questions? If not, thank you very much. Do you have a comment to make yourself? Yes. The only thing I would like to say about the funding facility and the extension of the program, according to the regulation, there can be no extension of programs. But as there will be negotiations starting for the new programming period, let me tell you that we are open to all sorts of proposals in order for us to be able to submit it to the financing facility in view of negotiations that will start. So it would be of great help to us if we had proposals, suggestions, ideas that we could present to the financing facility. Yes, there's been ECA asked for an extension as well for its actions. Unfortunately, it's not possible. I would like to add on to what Mr. Savranas said, that there is a very big need to have money for the afterwards of the unaccompanied minors after they are 18, because that period is a very hard one. Once these minors become adult, they have to get away from the hospitality shelters and structures and so on, and there has to be shelters for people between the ages of 18 and real adulthood for their social and professional integration. Thank you very much. Let's take a break.
So we can go on with the second session. The topic is child protection for unaccompanied minors. The session will be moderated by Madam Christiana Konstantopoulou, doctor from the Sorbonne University, a professor for sociology and communication in Pantheon University. Mrs. Konstantopoulou.
Ορίσατε στη δεύτερη συνεδρία της...
Good morning. Welcome to the second session of today's meeting. Can you hear me? Yes. I have to say that this session is more practical. It has to do with the practical implementation. I mean, how the program that we heard before in the previous session has been implemented in practice, how scientists are trying to implement it in practice, problems they have been faced with, and so on. There is a slight change in the agenda. So the change is that one partner, Mr. Yannis Stavridis, who is in the Migration Division of Norway, has asked to say something online before starting our speeches here. Mr. Stavridis? So we can go on because Mr. Stavridis has been disconnected. So when he connects again, we can make a pause and let him speak. So let's go for the time being. My role is only a typical formalistic one. I will just be giving the floor to the speakers. They have 10 minutes each. I have to be quite strict with time because these are the instructions I have got. We are starting with Mrs. Irini Nika, who is a sociologist and coordinator for the projects, and she will describe the situation in Greece. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Irini Nika, And I was hired as a coordinator under the act that is being presented here today, an act that has a target group of unaccompanied minors. Asylum seekers in our country, a very particular category of highly vulnerable children, because apart from the fact that as children they have the same needs as all other children of the world, moreover, being refugees, most have suffered serious physical and psychological traumas, both in their country of origin and in the long, difficult and unknown journey that they have taken towards the host country. I will make some general remarks concerning the flows of unaccompanied minors into Greece, and then there will be more specific papers by following speakers. So in this context, we would say that in the European area, the inflows of unaccompanied minors
ανηλίκων ξεκινούν σε κάποια κράτη-μέλη όπως η Γερμανία.
Starting from member states such as Germany from the late 70s. Before the 90s, there are also inflows in the UK and France, at the late 90s also in Spain, and then in the decade 2000, Belgium and Ireland were also added to the host country.
Συγγνώμη, θα μπορούσαμε να βάλουμε λίγο το PowerPoint για να φαίνεται. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ, συγγνώμη. Για να βλέπουμε να έχουμε την εικόνα. Ωραία. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ.
That was a pause to make the projection on screen. So in Greece, unaccompanied minors appear with the first migration flows in the 90s. And those are the so-called children of the traffic lights, especially after the collapse of the former Yugoslavia and the crisis in Albania in the 90s. Greece was receiving hundreds of unaccompanied minors from third countries on its territory for more than a decade. Particularly the presence of children from Albania who were usually unaccompanied and were members of the Roma minority in Albania has been very strong. Many of those children would live in the streets, were begging and cleaning car windows at the traffic lights, selling small objects or committing minor crimes. And some of those became victims of trafficking or sexual exploitation. So the refugee issue came to the focus of the Greek and European attention in 2015 with hundreds of thousands of third country nationals who were arriving in Greece in order to go to Northern and Central Europe. This huge number of inflows has given characteristics of humanitarian crisis. Greece received the biggest number of arrivals because every day there were people arriving, especially on the northern eastern part of Lesbos, which is only 8 nautical miles from Turkey. Now, concerning the crisis of 2015, the key reasons that contributed to the escape of thousands of third country nationals were the war in Syria, the almost civil war in Afghanistan, the Al-Shabaab attacks in Somalia, the extremely authoritarian regime in Eritrea, the precarious condition in Iraq because of the armed conflicts in the interior of the country among the guards, military organizations and terrorist groups, and the harsh socioeconomic conditions in Pakistan and Bangladesh. According to the European Parliament, more than 1/4 of the 300,000 asylum seekers who were granted protection status in the EU in 2019 came from the war zones of Syria, with Afghanistan and Iraq holding the second and the third place respectively.
Εκτός από τις περιστάσεις
So, with the exception or apart from the conditions in the country of origin, another key cause of the refugee crisis were the harsh socioeconomic conditions refugees faced in the first reception countries, such as Lebanon, Jordan, and so on, where the states, because of the economic conditions prevailing there, did not allow a smooth social survival and economic integration of Syrian refugees. So the refugee crisis was transferred to the EU member states because citizens that were leaving their countries of origin were not happy with the conditions they found in the first reception countries, and they decided to take the journey towards Europe for a better future. As it is known, Greece is the key entry gate for Europe for refugees and migrants, mostly through its eastern and northern borders. They either come from the Turkish coast to the Greek islands, Chios, Samos, Kos, Leros, or through the land borders by crossing Evros River. Identification and registration is done in the reception centers on the islands or on Evros. It's the Reception and Identification Service which is in charge under the Ministry for Civil Protection. Those migration flows include very often vulnerable groups such as single mothers with their kids, disabled persons, families with many children, elderly people, victims of human trafficking, victims of tortures, unaccompanied minors, and so on. Concerning the unaccompanied minors, but also adult asylum seekers, European countries are divided into transit countries and destination countries. Destination countries are Sweden, Germany, and Norway, which are attractive because of their reputation for the good welfare state and for low unemployment and the child protection and protection of childhood and respect for human rights. And then there are transit countries such as Greece, Italy, and France. Moreover, many children from Afghanistan seek to reach the UK, where there is a big community of their fellow nationals. This makes child protection more difficult because usually they prefer to remain outside the formal asylum procedures, so they are at the mercy of traffickers since they wanted to continue their journey to the final destination.
Σύμφωνα με τα στατιστικά δεδομένα... Συγγνώμη, ωραία.
According to the statistics published by the Ministry for Migration and Asylum early April 2024, the estimated number of unaccompanied minors in Greece is 2,157, of whom 66 are separated minors accompanied by an adult who is not their custodian. 3 unaccompanied minors and 1 from Ukraine. Concerning the demographic characteristics, 87% are boys, 13% are girls, and only 7% are below the age of 14. Concerning the place of residence,
αναφορικά με τον τόπο διαμονής τους,
concerning their place of residence, 1,633 unaccompanied minors are staying in accommodation centers, 206 in semi-autonomous living flats, 152 in emergency accommodation structures, 119 in reception and identification centers, and 47 unaccompanied minors are staying in accommodation structures for asylum seekers.
Βρω τώρα. Δεν μπορώ να το βρω. Τέλος, το 29%.
Finally, 29% come from Egypt, 23% from Somalia, 17% from Afghanistan, 6% from Pakistan, and 9% from Syria. Thank you.
Σε σχέση με τις χώρες προέλευσης,
Concerning the countries of origin, according to data from the Migration and Asylum Ministry, we see that versus 2023, the number of unaccompanied minors from Egypt is much higher, while on the contrary, as unaccompanied minors from Somalia are a smaller number. And according to the data published by the National Solidarity Center from 2018 to 2021, the number of unaccompanied minors from Afghanistan has come down, as well as from Pakistan. In 2018, those were the biggest numbers, the biggest percentages.
επίσης το ποσοστό
Furthermore, the percentage of female unaccompanied minors, so the percentage of minor girls, over doubled actually between 2018 and 2024. So from 6%, it became 14%. The number of unaccompanied minors under the age of 14 is between 7 and 8% for the same period. Finally, according to the data published by the National Center for Social Solidarity from 2018 to 2021, the number of unaccompanied minors in Greece is dropping. However, concerning the migration and the refugee phenomenon, we should not forget that official statistics reflect only the tip of the iceberg. So this is not the real dimension, and the precise estimate of the populations would be the topic for an entire thesis. Finally, I would like to close with the words of one unaccompanied minor, which evidence exactly the spectrum of vulnerability for unaccompanied minors. So in February 2019, under a workshop for drama therapy, it was a drama therapy workshop for unaccompanied minors aged 16 to 18, under the auspices of Metadrasis, an NGO. The drama therapist asked the kids to make a drawing or to write poems inspired from famous poets. And responding to this experiential exercise, a Syrian unaccompanied minor was reported by Metadrasis to have written the following verses inspired from Havesi Razi, an Iranian poet of the 19th century. So he wrote, "Sometimes I wish I could be a young child again. Scratched knees are cured more easily than a broken heart." Thank you.
Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ την κυρία.
Thank you, Mrs. Nika, for having remained within her time limits. I liked her poem. It was really very moving. I suggest that we hear all our speakers and then at the end of this session to have a Q&A. Mr. Nikos Alexiou, consultant with UNICEF for the protection of the child, and he's going to give us some guidelines for unaccompanied minors. Thank you very much. I'm Nikos Alexiou. I am representing the Office of UNICEF in Greece. Thank you, Mrs. Dedouli, for your invitation, and thanks to all the members of ECA for their cooperation. I'm here to speak about the Convention for the Child When we are talking about unaccompanied minors, what we must not forget is this family status. Are they separate from the families and so on? What is important is that more than anything else, they are children. This is what I am here to talk to you about. As it is well known, Greece signed the UN Convention for the Child in 1990 and ratified it in 1992. The whole framework for the protection of children's rights was corroborated by the EU in 1997, and more than 32 years after that, the convention is protecting children and vulnerable citizens. It was adopted in 1989 in the General Assembly of the UN. In order to actually convert the children from passive charity recipients to human beings with their own rights. Convention recognizes, acknowledges that childhood is a vulnerable time and that children need special care and protection. It has been ratified from every single country on the planet, bar the United States. 54 articles to this convention and setting all the norms for prosperity of children in all their developmental stages, and it is valid for all children under 18. Irrespective of gender, origin, religion or handicap. So these are the four fundamental principles: no discrimination, the best interest of the child, life, survival, development, important for every child, and of course the free expression of an opinion and speech. Very, very quickly, what I would like to say is that a system of child protection is comprised of legislation and policies, human resources, financial resources, a governance mechanism, data collection and services for the protection and response. 3 levels in all these services: prevention, that is primary, secondary, timely intervention, and tertiary, specialized handling of a case. ECA is full of experts and has guided actions on all these 3 levels of protection. The primary level concerns services addressed to the general population for prevention reasons, aiming also at raising awareness, active participation and enhancement of families and the overall community of services professionals against violence, abuse, neglect and exploitation. On the secondary level, that is timely intervention, the actions are addressed to children that are under risk, and one of these categories are the children of refugees and unaccompanied children. Tertiary, we have to do with children that fall victims to violence, abuse, neglect or exploitation. where the children are really at risk. The services include investigation and maybe removal of the child from the family if this is judged necessary, protection, legal support, care of the child, and after care, that is, after the child has been removed from the family. In Greece, and as far as the framework is concerned, UNICEF mentions progress marked in Greece in matters of protection of unaccompanied minors, and it is the General Secretariat for Vulnerable Citizens and Institutional Protection is undoubtedly very important, and also extremely important and very great progress, the abolishment of keeping people in police stations while waiting for further moves to be made. Other steps that need to be acknowledged is the establishment of the framework for rules of function and authorization for the accommodation of unaccompanied minors, ensuring of quality services provided in centers of accommodation, and of course the establishment of a legal framework for the national system of guardianship of unaccompanied minors, and the mentors program that enhances the whole feedback system and the increase of participation of unaccompanied minors. The children, whether they are refugees or unaccompanied children, well, they are children no matter what, and in accordance with UNICEF, the progress towards an integrated protection system that needs to take into consideration all vulnerable groups of the population. Of course, the needs for constant funding and fair management remain, and of course access to health, to fostering, as well as to high quality interpretation services. And I shall close by saying that if there could be a long-term plan, then this plan so that plan would be to consolidate the two parallel systems of child protection. There are two parallel systems of child protection in Greece, because recent years refugee issue has given rise to a framework, but there is no system, there is no provision in this system for children that do not exactly come under the regulations of an unaccompanied refugee minor. So we consider that the purpose must be to find good practices and tools for the protection of Greek children and also unaccompanied minors coming from other countries. That is, all the children in Greece And this framework ideally ought to be set up, funded by more national resources in order to become more autonomous vis-à-vis the EU funds. But however, this is not easy to materialize.
Πάρα πολύ, ειδικά δεν μ' αρέσει να κάνω τον
Thank you very much. Well, I don't want to play the role of a policeman, but since we have very limited time, although what speakers say are extremely interesting, I think it would be better to keep the questions at the end. Because what you're saying is interesting and very dense. So let me go on with the next speaker, Madam Margarita Caravella, psychology, doctor of psychology, working for mental health of unaccompanied minors in Babel Day Center, which is a mental health unit for migrants under an NGO called Sinirmos. She will talk about psychological support for unaccompanied minors.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Λοιπόν, καταρχάς ευχαριστώ.
Thank you very much for this invitation from ECA. Very important initiative for the support of this population. I will talk to you about psychological support inside and out of shelters or accommodation structures, and I shall start by saying, as previous speakers did, that unaccompanied minors are a very special population category because these are children and adolescents that have lived in non-regular circumstances. Well, this means that they have missed out on age transitions in their early adolescence and childhood. In other words, they've not been able to process changes or overcoming mournings. And I will say that adolescence, like as we know it in Europe, is not the same, or that it follows the same type of evolution in other countries. Psychological support of unaccompanied minors can be inside and outside hospitality or accommodation structures, and two frameworks can cooperate. As we know, the social service needs to see these minors, and the whole personnel of the accommodation center can be therapists, and minors themselves can select the person of their trust. So it's not the psychologist only, but the whole staff, psychologists and non-psychologists. So the central question when a child goes to the psychologist sent by the service is to ask him whether he has a request himself or herself, or others have made a request for him or her. Maybe the minor has not chosen to speak. That in itself is a very special circumstance, because it raises the question as to whether the child has come there on his or her own will or not, and that it is an information necessary to know for the ensuing therapy. What are the difficulties that a colleague can encounter? First of all, the history of this unaccompanied minor. Histories do not always arrive complete to the personnel, because histories are taken in parts derived from the narrative of the unaccompanied minor, which is quite fragmented. Does the person who takes the history have to know the full thing? it is important for him or her to know what things to touch on and what things to leave out, because unaccompanied minors do not always feel the need to speak about the misfortunes that they encountered during their trip. Sometimes they prefer to speak about their daily life, daily reality in the country they have come to. Without the history, however, of the unaccompanied minor, this is not always possible. Observation is important. We can observe how the relational habits of the child, how the child is in the accommodation, what does he or she do with the activities that are proposed to him, or how do they coexist with the other children. This observation can provide valuable information from the earlier childhood of these people. Also, those who work in such shelter cannot get away from the rules or the framework set by the shelter. There is no freedom, this type of freedom. Let's say that the child, the minor, did not come back in the evenings. They spend the night outside. The service needs to talk about it with the child. It is it is not a very nice role. They don't like this. This is what, but they have to do it. And this is what I mean by saying that the colleagues have to remain within a set framework of rules and regulations. And child inside the hostel, the shelter, relates to the people like he would with his parents, and we're talking about parental transferences, not always easy. I remember a colleague that was doing her practice, that she was agonizing about a suicidal attempt of a child, and her anxiety in case the child should try again to take his or her life. And of course it goes without saying that in the therapy framework negotiations may appear that are necessary to be made. And because our colleagues are exposed to this relationship, they are also exposed to the projections by the minors. Minors may see the psychologists as people that are very nosy, that have power, and that they can help them or not. And of course, identifications default identifications are actions that come to mind spontaneously, which means that we sometimes become very strict. It goes without saying that it is also necessary to have a very good framework of cooperation with the other colleagues. But what do they need? First of all, they need to have stability in the personnel, that is, not to have high turnover of the staff. But this is difficult because people change. If the staff is stable, doesn't change, then relationships, bonds are formed in it. And of course, interpretation services, we make lots of efforts to have stable interpretation services. There are languages that are difficult to find interpreters for, like Somali. We don't always have a Somali interpreter in the shelter. But this is very important for the children, for more immediacy. And the same goes for our colleagues when they can have recourse to the services of an interpreter. also normalcy, regularity, that is participating in activities, school and so on, and of course the chance to say goodbye, which often these children have missed because of the many forced separations they have had to endure in their lives. Also external people that can work within the shelter, and when the service provided is external, it is easier to see who needs assistance. Sometimes assistance is necessary for the staff of the shelter and for the children, and we can work with them because this has a very good holding effect on the children. Also, unaccompanied minors present with identity issues, difficulties they experience in the shelter, and management of their obligations and objects. I shall conclude by saying that we don't the colleagues do not necessarily need to work with the traumatic part unless the child wants to open up this part. Cooperation can really create a hug that can hold the children and their needs, and what I would say for therapists and psychologists is that they need to be able to survive and also resist the aggressivity, because aggressivity is an act of growing up. Thank you very much. Very difficult work for psychologists, especially as you require the services of interpreters. Of course, we will have questions afterwards. Let us now ask Mrs. Nefeli Stavropoulou, who is a psychologist and an expert in protection of unaccompanied minors. She will speak exactly about this, the function of MEA as best practice in the protection of unaccompanied minors living in precarious conditions.
Καλησπέρα σας και από μένα.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the National Mechanism for Emergency Response under the General Secretariat for Vulnerable Citizens and Institutional Protection, I would like to thank ECA for the collaboration we've had so far. Just a moment, give me a minute, I have to set up my computer.
Το PowerPoint. Slideshow, εδώ είμαι. Το έκανα. Όχι, εντάξει, δεν χρειάζεται, θα το κάνω από εδώ. Ναι. Ευχαριστώ, γι' αυτό έκατσα από εδώ. Λοιπόν, ο εθνικός...
So, the National Mechanism for Emergency Response, the General Secretariat, rather, for Vulnerable Citizens and Institutional Protection,
είναι η αρμόδια αρχή
is the competent authority for the protection of unaccompanied minors in Greece. It was set up in July 2023. And it concentrated all the competences of the Special Secretariat for the Protection of Unaccompanied Minors that was abolished. MEA was designed by the then Special Secretariat and the UN High Commissioner for Refugees in 2020 and became operational in 2021. The goal was, or rather the operational performance was to set up a structure for immediate accommodation of unaccompanied minors who are homeless or live in precarious conditions. In July 2022, EMEA was set up. This is the provision that describes the tasks and competencies. So having won the bet for abolishing the protection structure, it is for kids who are victims of abuse, torture and exploitation and so on. The goal is to set up an integrated framework to detect and protect that will be a friendly system for the reception of those children. And it will also become a preventive mechanism for minors who become victims of human trafficking. The components of EMEA are shown here. First of all, a hotline, then mobile units and information centers. Those are handled by the Network for Children Rights in Athens, and in Thessaloniki, Central Macedonia, ARSIS is responsible. And there is also an ARSIS team in Promachon on the borders. The emergency accommodation structures handled by IOM, and interpretation and escorting, which is carried out by Metadrasis. And also protection for all minors program run by the Network for Children's Rights, but those will be presented in more detail later on. The central team, which is in the Ministry for Asylum and Migration, handles the hotline. There are expert scientists, psychologists, social workers, and lawyers there. It started operating in April 2021. It works 24/7 with the support of the National Center for Social Solidarity, ECA. It receives reports from all entities, police authorities, and so on, NGOs, public health bodies, and citizens themselves, as well as by children themselves, unaccompanied minors. It coordinates the mobile units and the competent authorities for the transfer of children to emergency accommodation, and it also provides tele-interpretation from Metadrasis, and also support for the identification of children. Cooperation with ECA. An MOU was signed with ECA. So this partnership started in the beginning of 2023. There is a 24/7 support of the functioning of the hotline, EMEA hotline. There is a diversion of the calls to the national hotline Child Protection 1107. ECA associates would record the cases from those calls when EMEA was out of office, and then the competent authorities were notified. These are the field task forces, mobile units and info desks. In Athens, this is handled by the Network for Children Rights. In Thessaloniki by ARSIS. There is also street work for active detection of unaccompanied minors in the street. There is also provision of first aid, basic goods, psychosocial support, and legal counseling. There is also rapid best interest assessment. Children are escorted to emergency accommodation, age determination, and for other areas outside Attica and Central Macedonia, Metadrasis will do all that.
Με τα οποία συνεργαζόμαστε.
Police stations we are closely working with are 10 in Athens and 1 in Thessaloniki. They do the identification for those children, children who have not been identified because they do not carry any ID documents. In June 2023, there was training for the reference police stations in Athens. It's also important to point out that a police order was issued in July 2022 for the placement of children who are detained in Athens in emergency accommodation structures. so they are not led to the pre-departure center anymore. The speaker is extremely fast. We are trying to follow. This is the identification process for a child. This is, in summary, the identification process. The emergency accommodation structures are 3 in Attica, 1 in Central Macedonia, 155 places in total.
Σκοπός είναι τα παιδιά να φύγουν,
The goal is for the children to stay there up to 3 weeks and then be transferred to long-term accommodation structures. The Protection for All Minors program concerns children who are outside the accommodation framework, but we are trying to bring those children under protection. And in this framework, there is close cooperation with the social services of the municipality. Usually they stay with people from the same national origin or family. EMEA is designated as the responsible authority for the reception of separated and unaccompanied minors from Ukraine. There are specific actions once they reach the borders. This is a description of the process for the protection of those children. But I shall go faster because I'm out of time. These are the statistics so far. So since the beginning of the war, EMEA has been notified of 590 children from Ukraine. Then sea rescue. This is a phenomenon which is very broad since the beginning of 2024. EMEA is informed about many children, mostly at the age 15 to 17. All of them are boys, Egyptian mostly, who are transferred to the accommodation structures, mostly in Athens. EMEA is a best practice, while the hotline, best practice for international conferences, the hotline is user-friendly and accessible. Statistically, these are the statistics concerning what Mrs. Nika said before. 8,300 is the number of children referred to EMEA. The most are boys. The legal status registered by the Hellenic police or non-registered. They are mostly found in Athens, lower numbers in other areas. Citizenship mostly from Afghanistan, but those are numbers from 2021 because this current year there is a rapid increase in children from other origins, Egyptian mostly. Housing, homeless or in precarious conditions or hosted by the police or an open accommodation center. 4,890 children have been housed so far. These are the statistics until the end of March. So today we could say that 5,000 children are being hosted. We have reached the number of 5,000. 5,964 is the number of housings. We are talking about children who have been housed repeatedly. 11,199 communications, contacts by EMEA. The same numbers here. This is the allocation in each year and allocation in terms of the origin. So that was all in short. Thank you for your attention.
Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ. Είναι πάρα πολύ ενδιαφέροντα όλα αυτά που έχουμε.
Thank you very much. This was all very interesting and I'm sure
δυνατόν στο έργο που έχουμε αναλάβει.
I'm sure the goal is for all to do our best. Now it's time for questions and I believe that speakers will have the chance to answer to your questions.
Απλά πάρα πολύ γρήγορα.
But very, very briefly, my question, we heard about the work, which is really to be praised, but we should see how there could be interconnection and coordination of actions. The gentleman from the Ministry of Labour said before about the integration of unaccompanied minors to education. And I was talking with colleagues before, teachers, sociologists, who are complaining because there is too much violence. So I don't know if there could be such an integration, or whether we should have entities, bodies, to be able to improve the situation. Otherwise, things are very difficult. And we should also check the mentalities, the culture. It's not just the work, it is also the mindset of people and also the empathy of the police. I don't want to talk about the latest events, but the latest development, but this is all included. All this has to be somehow coordinated, which requires shared culture, mindset, and also we should see the role of this social media there. That was a very, very quick remark. I don't want to monopolize the floor. So in this context, please ask your questions to the speakers.
Κυρία Γούναρη.
Mrs. Gunari.
The EMEA line is 24/7, but it's coming to an end in a week's time. Is there a provision for the 24/7 operation of the line? Because it is true that there cannot be 24/7 EMEA. It will go back to Monday to Friday, and half day for Saturday, and Sunday the line will not be operating. I can understand that there will be needs for the hours and time zones where the line will not be operational, so there will have to be an adjustment. They will have to use the line when it is available. There is no provision for something else for the time being. Let me ask you, you mentioned a toolkit with relation to the criteria for best interest of children. ECA has been appointed the national coordinator of the European guarantee, as you know. I don't know what has happened, but it would be very positive to see to have the outcome of the use of the toolkit incorporated in the national plan that we have been running for the last 2 years. Answer. UNICEF has had no part to play in this, but so I will tell you what I know. Of course, the ministry manages the pilot implementation of this toolkit. Some elements, some data have been given in the framework of the child guarantee, and we shall see how this is going to work out. Jan Stavrenas from the Ministry of Labor, again. I heard with great interest the fact that the lifting of protective guarding, but how was it replaced? I heard that instead of the children being taken to Amygdaleza, they are kept preventively somewhere else, but I would like some more clarifications. Now children are transported on the same day, if not the following, to accommodation structures. So the recording, registration by the police that initially required 3 days, now it takes place a lot more faster. Yes. In the past, children were taken to Amygdaleza. It was a detention center where they spent maybe some days. Yes, so they spent some time there, and all identification procedures took place there in Amygdaleza. But now the difference is that these children are housed straight away within a few hours and to a couple of days at most. So there is availability. Yes. And the staying of the children, is it monitored in the structures, in the accommodation structures? Yes, there is monitoring, but in emergency accommodations are used for 3 weeks at most for children, where all the tests take place. And then a request is placed with the accommodation structures of the Ministry of Migration. In other words, the purpose for an emergency accommodation is not to last more than 3 weeks, especially for new referrals, in order to have a more immediate response and house the children as quickly as possible. There are cases, however, where there are no places, but we are trying to decongest them and take children faster to long-term accommodation services in order for places to be liberated, to be vacated, for newcomers to be able to use them. But this is... do you have a feeling of how long? No. This is not something we can know. There are other questions. Yes, one last thing and then I will stop. Mr. Alexiou said that there is an approval procedure for accommodation structures. Therefore, structures need to fulfill certain prerequisites. Have all structures received certification? There are frameworks for certifying that structures receiving the funds fulfill the necessary criteria. Of course, and criteria will become stricter in the future. But apart from that, I also mentioned the operation of supervision and evaluation unit in the framework of the Secretary of the General Secretariat. So there are criteria, and there is the body that is ready and capable of doing spot checks that are regular or extraordinary in case it is necessary. My feedback is that it works in a framework of cooperation between the centers, and please don't enter into a dialogue. There are many questions. But did you receive an answer to your question?
Ωραία, αν μπορείτε λίγο σύντομα απαντήσετε σε αυτό.
Εργάζομαι για τη UNICEF, δεν μπορώ να...
I cannot give you an answer about the unit that is in charge for that, but if you wish, I can bring you in contact with them so that you can ask them this question. This is sketches.
Ευχαριστώ.
I have the following question. Do we have any data, figures, or percentages of children who are in the structures and attend primary or secondary education? Do you have how long are they staying in such education? And are they integrated by learning Greek language? Because it has happened once. I had a class with Afghans and they didn't speak any European language, English, French, German, Italian, nothing. And I was trying to do Google translation into Pashtun because I was not speaking any Pashtun, or I was trying to find some points of communication with them. Those children stayed in the school just for a short while. I don't know what was their fate thereafter. I don't know why they stopped showing up. So even in the school life, in the beginning of the school year, or somehow there should be integration of those children. We should have a reasoning of integration of those children. And then what about the language? If children do not speak Greek, I don't know how we could handle that. But the central question is, do you have any figures, numbers, percentages of children who attend the school? How long do they stay in school? And what is the dropout rate? And are there any benefits, any allowances granted to children who attend education? Because that could be an incentive for them to start attending school, but then they leave it. I could give you the following answer. Children who are staying in emergency accommodation structures do not enroll in schools because they only stay there for a short while, so it makes no sense having such a process. This is done in the long-term accommodation structures. And the competent department is the integration unit under the General Secretariat. So I cannot answer this question. That's a very good question. I cannot reply. I can bring you in touch with somebody in charge. I don't know if Nikos would like to add one thing. Yes, just to add here, of course, integration of children in formal education is one of the top priorities, both for UNICEF and also for the General Secretariat. And obviously, there cannot be integration without integration in formal education. The only thing we can know from our cooperation through our cooperation with the General Secretariat is that for children who are in custody, and as Mrs. Nika said before, the total number in Greece is very big. The guardianship is for half of those children, around 1,300. Out of those 1,300, 60% has enrolled in formal education. Many children who are not in formal education are children who are in emergency accommodation, as my colleague said, from EMEA, so they have not enrolled in school yet, or they are children on the island of Samos or Lesbos, for example, where there are no vacancies for the time being, so there are no places in schools. But those children are expected to go into the mainland. But that's always desirable, and it's always a priority to have them integrated in formal education. Okay, you have the floor. Good afternoon. Alexandros Kliris. I'm a psychologist running this hotline, and I am working for this program. This has offered me a great experience, and I have also realized the importance of making the link with the different agencies. Implementation of these programs is very important because we are talking about a vulnerable group, which is the crowning of this entire framework that we want to support. So it seems that it's not the numbers that are important, because even if we help one child, I have the feeling that I have fulfilled my mission. And I would also like to say that in this context, this financing should not be wasted, and it would be good for implementation of the next programs to use the tools and the experience that we have gained. Thank you very much once again.
Κάποιος να απαντήσει κάτι σε αυτό από τους ομιλητές ή να πει...
Is there any speaker who would like to say a couple of words on this? Is there any other question? No? Very, very shortly, very, very briefly, very quickly, would you like to say anything? No? Okay. So, I shall invite Madam Gunari to draw the conclusions of this day.
Λοιπόν, θέλουμε να σας ευχαριστήσουμε πάρα πολύ για τις...
We want to thank you for your participation. This good practice of cooperation between ECA and the Ministry of Migration and Asylum must work as an example to emulate by all these agencies that are involved in this very difficult task. I will remember what Mrs. Konstantopoulou and Mr. Stetos said, i.e. in order to integrate citizens from other countries in our societies, our society must be a cohesive, a coherent society. And for this to happen, we need to have the right services addressing unaccompanied minors. Without these services, the best interest of the children cannot be served. However, this type of crisis and the extension of this crisis is relatively recent in Greece, and the Greek state was not prepared for a crisis of such dimensions. Many important steps have been taken, and we hope that this will continue, and I hope to see you again in the framework of new actions in this framework.
Μπορούμε να περάσουμε, υπάρχει ένα ελαφρύ...
There is a light lunch that you can partake of.